welcome to Cargo Film Presents. I'm Dan.
And I'm Dave.
Cargo Film Presents, we review the latest documentaries, and today we're going to be talking about VAL. The camera loved Val Kilmer, and in the new documentary VAL from Amazon and A24, we learn Val Kilmer loved the camera.
My name is Val Kilmer. I'm an actor. I've lived a magical life, and I've captured quite a bit of it.
Push the button!
I was the first guy I knew to own a video camera.
Here we are, filming ourselves.
Is that a video
rolling,
camera?
yeah.
Oh, that's really cool, Val.
During his life, he shot over thousands of hours of footage of home movies, but also his own audition tapes, footage on set from his iconic, well-known, and beloved movies, which he's pieced together with the help of his son, Leo Scott, and Ting Pu. Not allowing a bout with throat cancer to stop him, Val's an autobiographical reflection from a Hollywood star on acting, as well as his life's triumphs and tragedies. So, Dave, does Val deliver in Val?
He delivers something, and it's probably hard to make out at first exactly what he's delivering. I suppose the first point you want to make about the film is that it's kind of been written, in some of the press that it functions more like a memoir, right, than it does what most people, I guess, consider a conventional documentary, where there's a certain amount of distance between the filmmaker and the subject. Here, it's apparent that he's kind of part of the filmmaking team as its subject. And it's important to make that distinction. I think, that the film doesn't hide that fact either. I think it acknowledges that Kilmer had a hand in telling his own story as he saw it. All to say it's a far from the complete story of Val Kilmer, if that's what you really want.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it certainly appears that Val has creative control of this project, at least some, the final cut or whatever it may be. I did read the filmmaker say, of course, as you probably would, that, nothing was off limits in terms of the footage, at least, certainly
right.
of the footage that Val shot. Now, how much of other parts of his life the filmmaking team was allowed to explore is unclear, but we don't really get into that very much in the film itself.
No, you don't. And, and that's okay. The filmmakers have been very forthright about all that information and so on. So it's all good. But it's to the viewer who's looking for something to watch and clicking on that and thinking they're getting, full story and so on. But, what you do discover here certainly is you got to give Kilmer credit for, shooting as much footage as he has. And it's some pretty cool footage, right? I mean, he shoots himself in his personal life, and while working, he seemed to have a compulsion to record himself as much as he could. And as you say, it's only a small sliver of what he shot over a 40-year period, and of course he also writes this film. In any case, the first thing I thought of, I suppose, when I sat down to watch this is like, why would anyone want to watch something about Val Kilmer? I'm not being silly about that. It's more like, why would I want to watch a film or Val Kilmer? Why would I care? I mean, he was never a big megastar for any serious length of time. I suppose there was a period there for 5-6 years or so, right? The Doors, Batman era, late 80s, early 90s. And then he kind of faded from sight almost as quickly as he appeared, mainly because of his own doing. But, that's kind of how his career trajectory happened. He was a good actor for sure, but never really blew me away. Would you watch it because it kind of pulls back the curtain on the making of movies? The film gives you some behind the scenes footage, but he's on set with actors and filmmakers, and even that, it seems like it's pretty tame. The worst you get is his interaction with John Frankenheimer on the set of The Island of Dr. Moreau. But even there, you feel like from some of the stories you've heard about Val Kilmer, that there's a lot of good bits left out, from that shoot.
Shut the video camera off.
I will keep it on until we're rehearsing.
Oh, Val.
So, are there like major revelations about acting or about the actor himself? Okay, sure, about the actor, but nothing seriously profound. I don't know, in my opinion, at the risk of sounding a little cold, like he pays homage to his mom. It lasts like 10, 12 minutes, at least it felt like that. And I was just sitting there saying, she seems like a lovely woman and all, but they didn't make me care enough about Val and or his mother to make me really sad about his mom, passing away. I was far more interested in his dad's story because, he was somewhat of a broken man after Val's brother died, and he also coerced Val into giving him a big chunk of money in a failed business. Anyway, I digress. Then there's the superhero element, right? If you're a superhero movie fan, he played Batman. And for some people, that's all you need. All right. Long way of saying why I at least found the film finally interesting after watching most of it. And it's because of his present condition, coupled with his fall from fame and success.
I was recently diagnosed with throat cancer. I'm still recovering, and it is difficult to talk and to be understood. But I want to tell my story more than ever.
I've tried to hear the world. I want to survive.
The fact that he has such trouble speaking after surgery elicits instant sympathy. It is tragic. He's an actor and he loses his voice. On top of that, there's this kind of the tragic timing of, him having put all of his life savings into the Mark Twain project, only to have it cut short by his illness. And I found that Mark Twain section of the story the most poignant. He really seemed to lose himself in that role. He seemed never better. And that's why his illness at the time that it happened is kind of heartbreaking. He seemed to be maybe on the verge of a career renaissance if that project took off. But he seemed to be committed heart and soul. He was just, from the clips you see, he was unrecognizable in that role. So, that's kind of what made it worth watching for me ultimately after all that. So sorry for taking so much time. We can edit this.
Feel very strongly about it. Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, I do feel like the documentary and Val, it opened the door a little bit on some, aspects of his life and some aspects of the creative process of being an actor in Hollywood, but it didn't fully let you into the room. It did kind of skip on the surface of some of those things where you did feel like it would have been better to maybe explore some of those areas in a more profound and deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to answer your question, why would someone watch this? Yeah, as you said, I mean, there's a certain nostalgia factor built in, watching it, starting the film, I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Like all these films from your childhood, Top Gun, Real Genius, where you kind of fell in love with Val Kilmer as this, super cool, slightly arrogant perfectionist guy, and so that was, I think, certainly, an aspect for people to kind of just easily click on this thing. But yeah, once you get past that, I think it does start to, feel a little bit flat because it is just Val's story and him telling his story. And so it does feel a little one-dimensional and it's chronological. So you start kind of going through his movies chronologically and you're kind of like, okay, this is
right.
getting a little bit old. Until you hit those parts where there starts to, it comes back to life with the island of Dr. Moreau and the problems on set there. And, because it was the moment where he finally got to work with one of his heroes, Marlon Brando, and the whole thing was a disaster. I kind of wanted a whole film or at least a lot more time there.
Agreed. I had the same idea.
It would have been kind of amazing to to see that, because it's the moment of his, his the I guess the bottom
The
of his,
beginning of his, yes, the bottom, or I suppose the beginning of his downfall, like
Exactly.
officially his ouster from, juicy roles in Hollywood. Right.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, it did have a little bit of a tunnel vision perspective, but you're right. I did think the Mark Twain stuff. That's when it also came to life again for me, is in the Mark Twain section, as you said. It's just, it's like you wouldn't say this is the best documentary. It has a lot of limitations to it built in, because it is just Val telling Val's story, really. But you might say it's, Val Kilmer's best performance ever, because, he says in the film, he put himself in some of the parts of himself in some of the roles, only parts of himself. But, this film is kind of this, like the fullest expression of himself, his range as an actor and a performer. It's kind of a documentary as an actor's showcase. That's, what I could kind of come up with to describe.
That's good. That's good. I think you're being too kind, but yes, I think it's nice framing. That's for sure. I still think his best role was as Mark Twain. I think him as Mark Twain is better than Val as Val. But there are other poignant moments. There's the irony and the sadness of seeing Kilmer, who professed to always have valued the highest craft of acting when he was famous, had to subject himself to those fan conventions like Comic-Con, right, where he's signing an endless array of Batman paraphernalia. And he does describe his experience on the Batman movie as kind of the opposite of what he wanted, right, in the profession, and that also kind of contributed a bit to his career downfall. But here he is engaging in it in full force in a desperate attempt as a source of income. Obviously, at the tail end of his career, he just wasn't getting the roles, and also with his voice as it was, he had to subject himself to that. So and he doesn't express any regret on how he handled parts of his career, and you can tell he isn't thrilled to be in that situation. There's that telling scene where he had to puke when he's in the middle of the signing event. It's almost like his body was manifesting what his mind could not. Right. But that was definitely a punch in the face.
One of the things they buy for all that money, your life for a period of time.
I have behaved poorly.
More wine, more drunk, more women.
I have behaved bravely. Bizarrely to some.
How do you heal a broken heart?
I see myself as a sensitive, intelligent human being, but with the soul of a clown.
Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't kind of know. I didn't read much about it going in, and it just did bring up like, okay, Val Kilmer's reputation was this moody, difficult actor, who got himself into trouble, and this film almost feels the narrative of it is an explanation and a rebuttal to Hollywood. Is like, this is what happens to ambitious, talented actors in Hollywood, is they get, pushed into these, certain roles that they don't want to do. They have to do them. They're literally kind of molded into superhero suits. He talks about how much he hated doing Batman, and, how he basically had to just was told where to stand and what to say, and couldn't really do anything. And it was as you said earlier, it's supposed to be the biggest role an actor can get. And it was just the most awful, humiliating, socially, isolating experience for him. And so in some ways, this is what happens to people like me, actors like me, creative artists in Hollywood. Now, I mean, I don't know how much to believe of that or not, but that's certainly what the film was selling, because there were no other perspectives. There was no other context of what was going on in Hollywood at the time, how other actors may have dealt with those kinds of conflicts or issues. But that's and Val finds, in Val's own film, Val finds his redemption through, Mark Twain doing this role. And, you can't help but connect it to his brother, who was his creative collaborator, throughout his childhood, and who Val describes as a artistic genius, and who died at 15, I think it was, in an epileptic fit, fell into the family pool. And so it felt like he had sort of found his brother again, this sort of spirit and soul of what they were doing as kids, channeled that into Mark Twain. And in a sense, he got at least some sense of redemption from this thwarted Hollywood career that apparently was not his fault. And
right. Well,
I don't know how much of that is accurate or not, but that's certainly the narrative of the film.
That is definitely the narrative of the film, and that's why those Mark Twain sequences again are my favorite in the entire film, and then the entire story. And yes, that is one way to characterize it, and that's how they've characterized it here. You can also say, if you want to be less than kind, you can say that he was not a savvy guy. He wasn't able to negotiate Hollywood so that he could keep doing the interesting work that he cherished so much and searched out. He didn't learn the lesson that a lot of these grade A actors learn, that you have to endure the clunkers to get to the stuff you really want to do. He had the opportunity, capitalize on his fame, but acted like a guy who deserved better, and then that kind of just helped fizzle out his career. And just really too bad, because he was all set up, and I bet there were, and if that Frankenheimer exchange footage that they showed in the film is any indication, if that's just a small snippet of, how he was on set, and I bet you there's a lot worse stuff, because I have read some worse stuff. Now, whether that stuff is true, but that stuff is out there. That was just the tip of the iceberg about, what an arse he really was. And so I'm sure there were a lot of people in Hollywood that are like, good riddance, thanks for coming, then there's this other element of, like you say, kind of an actor born in the wrong generation of Hollywood filmmaking, where all these big franchise tentpole films are in overdrive, and he just wanted to make quality work, and he wasn't getting that quality work, and not a lot anyhow. He did for a bit. But he wasn't getting a lot of those parts even after, he had kind of, rejected Hollywood fame. And maybe there's a lack of self-knowledge there, that he thought he was the next Brando, but, maybe nobody else thought he was. So
I spent decades finding my voice.
I was a perfectly normal person.
Through characters.
I give you about 4 takes with some different voices.
Through movies.
Yeah, there's different ways. There are different Val Kilmers, I suppose. That's is one way you can portray this. That you'd like to see somebody else have their hand at trying to tell that story.
I mean, this is precisely the problem with very subjective first-person memoir autobiographical filmmaking, is that you're allowed to kind of airbrush or omit those things which may call into question the narrative that you would like to sell about yourself, is that you are an uncompromising artistic genius, and no one else saw that or believed that or whatever, and it then forced you to be moody and difficult, and your kind of dreams were thwarted by that. And so I mean, it's unfortunate. I think that is part of the limitation of this documentary, is that there isn't any counter evidence or counter narratives to Val, the story that Val wants to tell. And I think that's very attractive. The part about the Hollywood is very attractive to people. They believe that truly, that it's Hollywood is a place that destroys artistic expression. And as you said, some people have negotiated that quite well. One for me, one for them, or whatever it is that you decide to do, in order to understand what the game is.
Correct. Yeah, agreed. But that's why I like to stick to the stuff that the information that isn't tampered with too much, doesn't have a tremendous amount of bias in the documenting, and that is the fact that tragically he did lose his voice and that must have been really tough to overcome as an actor, still wanting to work, and the fact that he had put all of his chips in on that Mark Twain project, and only to never have a chance to fully realize it. And then that is fact, and he seemed really, really amazing in that role. So so it pays off in the end, but it took a while to get there. So I give it a lukewarm recommendation, I would say, overall, because of that.
Yeah, I've also got a mixed mixed review about it. If you love Val Kilmer, you're probably going to get something out of this. If you don't know much about Val Kilmer or don't really care,
right,
you'll probably skip it. And I just wish there was more. Like, it's set up, at the beginning, he says, I wanted to tell a story about acting for a long time. But
correct.
There really isn't much.
No,
there isn't much revealed about acting that you probably didn't know already, which was
absolutely
main disappointment. I thought too. It was like, you do get a little bit, obviously, the Frankenheimer stuff. That was like, that for me felt like the one real documentary moment that you were getting, this kind of exchange, and the little sort of film he made on the set of Dr. Moreau as it was kind of falling apart. You could see Brando. You're like, oh wow, he's got this sort of instincts of a documentary filmmaker here, sort of putting together a story of this, breakdown on the set. But that was, that was not that was it, but that was certainly the peak of the.
Yeah. No, and I also thought, with Brando being his hero, I'm sure there was, they only had 7 seconds of Brando in this piece. So you wonder whether Brando just avoided him altogether on the set, not want to be filmed, or they weren't necessarily really good positive exchanges, and hearing about at this stage of his career how Kilmer was acting on set, and again with that Frankenheimer footage being any indication, there probably weren't a lot of really complimentary pieces of footage of Kilmer on that set, because while it seemed like it was problematic for a lot of reasons, Val was probably also one of them. So that's the doc I'd like to see Val Kilmer in. So
there you go. Well, barring that, I guess, if you do watch the film, go and read some stories about Val Kilmer from possibly other sources to get a more rounded picture of maybe the reasons that lie behind and the complicated reasons behind his fall from Hollywood. Probably worth looking up some of that stuff. But otherwise, any last thoughts on Val by Val Kilmer?
No, listen, he seems to have landed in a good place. So he's got his family, he's still active in the arts, and he's still putting out the positive vibes. So good for him.
Yep. So I think Val's main problem is that, he's got the soul and the volatile spirit of a character actor, but he's got the face of a leading man.
Right.
You just couldn't reconcile those things.
Yes. I think that's a much better way of framing it, but that's what I was trying to say earlier. Exactly.
Anyway, so Val by Val Kilmer and his son, you can watch on Amazon, and
all right.
we'll see you next time.
See ya.
It's a story about my life that is also not my life.